But first, Sir Keir Starmer has vowed to crack down on anyone sowing division after a week of violence in Northern Ireland. Technology Secretary Liz Kendall posted on Wednesday, those who use social media to incite violence and disorder are breaking the law. Next week, we will lay in Parliament an update to the Online Safety Act requiring services to quicker action to remove illegal content circulating during times of crisis. The violence started after footage of a knife attack in North Belfast on Monday night was shared widely on social media. Homes, businesses and vehicles were set alight and a number of people were made homeless after their properties were attacked and set fire by rioters going door to door, attempting to identify houses occupied by immigrants. But is social media to blame? Well, joining me now is the independent peer, Baroness Claire Fox. Welcome to the show. Thank you. A very disturbing week, a very disturbing incident that started it all, and very disturbing riots that took place in Belfast. But as I talked about there, really, is it social media that's to blame because we know the truth about what happened with a man attempted beheaded?
I mean, I think that's the problem, isn't it? That there isn't an issue that this government doesn't think could be solved by banning something or cracking down on freedom of information or freedom of speech. And what's really disturbed me is that after that absolutely horrendous barbaric attack, that the first instinct of government ministers is to say, we've got to ensure nothing happens as a response. Now, the riots that we've seen in Belfast have been very distressing. I mean, it is horrible to see racist thugs going from door to door and trying to identify whether there's a black person living there. I mean, God, that is proper racism. But the majority of the outrage in Belfast and in Northern Ireland more generally, which was not expressed through those riots, was that they couldn't cope with the fact that this terrible act had happened on their streets and that they'd been warning that things like this would happen because of a build-up of tension, like a pressure cooker, where they've been trying to say, look, there's a real problem with undocumented migrants living in the local community. We don't know who these often men are. There's a problem with the border not being policed. There's a problem of people hanging around outside migrant hotels and so on. And so these things bubble up. And the government's response is to try and somehow turn our gaze away from that horrible, horrible picture, that film. I mean, it was an attempted decapitation. Somebody got their eye gouged out. I mean, this is horrible stuff, right? And we're not meant to feel rage. We're not meant to feel angry. The Northern Irish community are the ones that you try and turn your gaze to say, don't do the wrong thing. And it feels to me as though they're, as usual, missing the point. And just, it was only the week before that we'd seen another terrible video, which was of Henry Novak, that young teenager, dying. And as he was dying, he was being arrested for a racist crime which he didn't commit because the police believed the perpetrator once he played the race card. And immediately, the notion is, how can we keep the lid on that? Rather than asking the question, how did we get to a situation where if you claim that it's a racist attack, then actually you're going to behave in such a way, and that's what happened with the police. Completely vile to watch that young boy dying, thinking that the state thought he was a racist. What a terrible thing.
You know, words like rage have been used, but it's not just about the actual inciting incidents themselves. It's that feeling of being gaslit by our politicians, and really gaslit for arguably nearly decades now.
But I thought it was, you know, again, I mean, you know, sitting in Parliament, listening to, in the Lords and in the Commons, this sort of watch your language, be careful you don't use the wrong words, as though that's the problem, you know, and that's constantly said, you know, if you say the wrong thing, that's going to make things much more inflamed. You think, no, you don't understand what's happening in the real world. People are very upset and worried about the fact that they have constantly voted and used their democratic voice to say, do something about both illegal immigration, but also the problem of non-integrated mass migration that was never agreed democratically. So that's what the public say, and they're just ignored. And then they're treated as though they're the problem. And then they're constantly called out as racists for expressing that, and told that they've got to be careful of what they hear and what they say. Now, it's just quite interesting. Why is all this happening? Because when Liz Kendall said, she used, I think it was her that used the example of saying, you know, it's terrible that they posted addresses of migrants in Belfast on the web. Well, that's incitement. We all know that.
There are laws that exist.
That's what you call illegal activity. The problem with this latest clampdown is you start to move into the territory of banning what they say legal but harmful as they decide it. They also say we're going to up the ante for times of crisis. Who gets to decide what a crisis is? Who's the crisis for? And I think one of the things that's become clear is that I'm afraid the political class are terrified of losing control of the narrative. And it's interesting today because in the papers today, I have to read this now because I'm so old I'll forget. It's called the Home Office's Research, Information and Communication Unit. This is a unit that comes out of the Home Office that basically says, let's try and control the narrative and shape the narrative. And effectively, it involves trying to manipulate the public reaction to any number of things.
Using the internet without a VPN, a virtual private network, is a bit like taking to the road without car insurance. All it takes is one unlucky moment to cost you a lot of cash. This video's sponsor is Private Internet Access. They are the VPN to help keep you safe. Click the link in the description below to find out why over 30 million people have downloaded PIA to protect themselves online. A virtual private network is an app that hides your IP address and helps keep your data private. When you're browsing the internet at home, you give up a large amount of data to businesses, to shops, and indeed to social media giants too. Hackers have the ability to steal your personal data with ease, including sensitive information such as passwords, keystrokes, and even your personal photos. Private Internet Access helps protect your personal data by encrypting your internet connection to keep your data out of the hands of cyber criminals. And it's not just hackers either to be concerned about. Information can be censored too. When Canada passed their C-18 bill, social media giants decided to ban news content on their platforms. But PIA can protect your ability to consume the news and content you love. Private Internet Access is available for Windows users, Mac OS, Android, Linux, iOS, and you can use one PIA subscription to protect an unlimited amount of devices. And we've got a huge GB News discount for you too. Click the link in this video's description and you'll get a massive 83% off PIA. That's under £2 a month, the price of a coffee, and you'll get an extra 4 months completely free on top. Also, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee too. Visit piavpn.com/GB News to start protecting yourself digitally today.
I mean, they say that we should be scared of Elon Musk posting misinformation. And then we've got a Home Office government unit that's trying to ensure that we don't quite get the truth, that we get the facts, but only as they want us to. I think this is incredibly frightening, but also as an indication of how defensive they are, because I think that they realise that, you know, one of the positive things about social media, and God knows it can be a sewer, but one of the positive things is that we sometimes find out things we wouldn't have been allowed to be told by those that rule us. And I think, even though it was horrible to watch that body cam from the police of that young boy dying, or listening to the phone call by the brother of the murderer, a 12-minute phone call in which it was so obvious that he was, you know, telling lies and that the police were being manipulated there, or to see that awful film of the man being attacked on the streets of Belfast, any of these things, we have to be grown up and know. We have to look these horrors straight in the face and as a society know how to deal with them. The idea that all the politicians do is say, no, you're not allowed to see that, or we're frightened that if you see it, you'll behave in a way that we haven't sanctioned, or you shouldn't feel rage. I mean, how dare they say that they're going to try and contain our emotional response to some terrible things that are happening. We should be able to do that. And when they try and suppress it, it makes it worse.
Absolutely.
It absolutely stirs the pot. It makes people more furious. And as you say, when you're gaslit like that, you just kind of want to lash out. You're kind of banging your head against the, against the wall. And I spend a lot of time, not when I watch your show, of course, but I spend a lot of time listening to the radio or watching the TV, and I'm literally screaming, going, "Oh my God, what's wrong?" And I can't bear it. And I have a voice, right? I have sufficient privilege that I can stand up in the House of Lords, or I can sit here and so on. But for most millions of people, they feel as though their voices are completely sidelined, demonised, set up as bigots, and therefore they're screaming not just at the telly, but sometimes on the streets now.
Absolutely, and silencing those voices more, it will of course only add to that. And the only reason that we know, as you say, any of this stuff has happened has been because of social media. There was also, in a lot of cases, it's stuff that happens on social media that isn't then reported even for a few days afterwards. There was a young girl teenager stabbed this week, and it took, I think, a few days before it finally got through to newspapers. What chances do you think this has of getting through? I mean, how many politicians are there that are actually going to stand up to this and will recognise the danger, or are they all just going to kind of line up behind it because it's easier to do this than it is to actually take steps on dealing with the other issues that are causing this all in the first place?
First of all, technically, the problem is that the Online Safety Act gives a huge amount of power to the executive to make these decisions behind the back of even parliamentary accountability, so that can be brought in through statutory instruments with a bit of a